So we've basically had all of Heresy now. Probably going to end up on a bit of a rant in this video. We'll touch on quite a few different elements, although a quick update to the video before I even get into it. I had actually made this before Bungie provided an update. It's an important update though. They've said, we've resolved an issue where players weren't being launched into the Nether's hull breach. This will be the only area players will initially spawn in until next week. So that is definitely a useful fix. If you're still looking for secrets in hull breach, this will hopefully be a massive help. Of course, there are still players having a similar issue with the founts area, and we'll touch on some design flaws with the Nether in this video, but until next week's reset, it would appear that Hull Breach will be the starting zone for the Nether, which is at least good as a kind of band-aid fix for the moment. So be sure to take advantage of that, whether you need secrets or just want to actually check out that new zone. But speaking about Heresy and the general state of the game at the moment, sentiment around Destiny is certainly mixed, and there are a number of reasons for that. However, Heresy, in my opinion, is certainly the best episode that we've had this year. That doesn't mean that everything is perfect. In fact, I would say that Heresy has one very significant flaw, but at the same time, Bungie have absolutely cooked on a number of levels with this episode. Obviously, the Nether and the Dreadnought is the biggest component of Heresy, really, in terms of gameplay. It's at least the best activity content that we've had in quite a long time, because we're talking about a huge, somewhat explorable space packed with secrets, encounters, and rewards. And Bungie have done similar things before, like the original Dreadnought from the Taken King, and if anything, in terms of stuff to do, I'd say the Nether actually pretty closely rivals the original Dreadnought on a lot of levels. Nostalgia is a powerful thing, of course, but the Heresy version probably has nearly the same amount and the same number of reasons to visit that destination as the original Dreadnought did. Of course, a much lesser version of something like the Nether was the Leviathan in Season of the Haunted. Haunted Leviathan was nowhere near to being the full original Leviathan raid destination, but the key difference is that the zones were available and fully explorable. But especially as we've gone into Acts 2 and 3 of Heresy, I think it's actually exposed to the biggest flaw with the design of the Nether. And with Barad being such a big chase in Heresy, it is one of the core elements that actually exposes that flaw. Getting to the point here, it's safe to say at this point that the Nether should have had a 100% explorable version with all zones accessible at all times. One of the reasons Bungie didn't do this is because they've gone for a structured activity as opposed to a free roam bubble. Having that structure there with multiple encounters, bosses, and reward opportunities in itself is a positive, as it is a highly rewarding activity and does provide that sense of being a destination and not just a place where a bunch of encounters take place, right? However, on the flip side, most of the objectives in Acts 2 and 3 have required specific secrets to be found, like the Skyburner code in the Hull Breach or the maze in the Founts, in order to progress the quest objectives. And the issue is that there feels like a massive amount of RNG actually involved in finding the correct zones, secrets actually showing up when you get to the correct zones, and the component where objectives to complete secrets or find osseous fragments, like in the Sunless Cell, those objectives can be disrupted by other players progressing further into the activity. So it's almost an identity crisis as to exactly what the Nether actually wants to be, right? And I'd say this negative feedback has become the most consistent series of complaints that we've seen around Heresy content, because if you have one missing worm to collect or a secret to uncover, as has been exposed with the arrival of the Hull Breach zone, some players are having to run the activity for 2 or 3 hours just to get that zone once. And when you need to find that zone 2 or 3 times on different reputation tracks and different parts of quests, it quickly turns that sense of mystery or excitement into what feels like a frustrating, unnecessary grind. And so the simple fix for this, in my opinion, would have been for Bungie to allow a full exploration of the Dreadnought in the Explore mode. I'd say as well, it's clear that they realised this would actually be an issue during development, which is why the Explore mode exists. And it feels a bit like an afterthought, right? Because it's sort of a half-baked answer to the problem that they knew would occur as players got deeper into this season. That is, of course, my opinion, and anecdotally, I think it's a thing that a lot of people are saying about the Nether. And while I may sound critical right now, what I'm actually saying is that Bungie have done an insanely good job with this activity and the episode overall. One of my biggest concerns when they said that the Dreadnought was coming back was that it would just be a gimmick to sort of try and get players interested in the episode. However, it has genuinely turned out to be a very good piece of content that Bungie have clearly put a lot of development time into. But I would say this component element of RNG feels like engagement bait, right? If you're running the Nether for one purpose, which is to find a secret or a specific zone, and that's the only reason that you're running the Nether in that particular instance, it can become highly frustrating. Not to mention the fact we are tasked with returning to some parts of the Nether multiple times as we progress, and the RNG around getting to certain areas, or getting specific objectives to show up when you actually get there, it's just causing way more irritation than it's actually worth. So I wish Bungie had taken a different path with that explore mode. And yes, it does mainly consist around Barodiad acquisition and upgrades, even going back to when Barodiad first dropped. Frankly, it's been RNG with more RNG, but for all the wrong reasons, right? And it's created a sour taste that just never really needed to be there. Outside of that component though, if we're talking heresy weapons, adepts, shinies and all of that, I think we actually have a really great loot table this season. The weapons are varied and they're interesting. Having the different rarities has given some good chase for different types of players, you know, from the basic drops all the way up to endgame level content. And in that way, also it's worth saying that the structured Nether actually works really well as an activity for that component. I do totally recognise the feedback around crafting and the lack of it for seasonal content at the moment. There are loads of players that really miss that feature and I totally get it. Plus, arguably, there's a level of overcomplicatedness in terms of how many different versions of these weapons there actually are, shinies versus adepts, and the value of the adept drops. I think Bungie need to carefully consider how they're going to approach this stuff in the future. Looking at Court of Blades, I think without a doubt this is a secondary activity, in my opinion. That's always been the case with these episodes. And for Court of Blades specifically, the rewards at first didn't match what we could achieve in the Nether. I actually found it to feel pretty unrewarding in comparison, although Bungie have improved that now. And I'd also say I think Court of Blades was a better second activity than something like Tomb of Elders was last season. It's also very cool to get the Sunless Cell Strike back. My only complaint personally is that the activity doesn't really piece into the Heresy lineup very well outside of that first quest to collect fragments and exotic upgrades, right? That bit was cool and it's neat to have it as a GM, but it does feel like a wasted opportunity to do something like have it as a new farming mode for heresy weapons. You know, imagine if we could run an expert or GM level version of that strike with highly elevated drop chances for shiny or adept weapons. That certainly would have made it make more sense, although perhaps Bungie had concerns about population in the Nether or Court of Blades if they were to do that. And that probably is an episode problem overall, right? It's all good having multiple activities drop through the episodes. And we've seen the same thing with Echo's Battlegrounds and Tomb of Elders. They just didn't feel like there was a great reason to actually replay them, right? But back to Heresy, as a seasonal offering, the story's been really cool. There are some big implications both now and in the future, even if it falls short in some regards. Overall, I'd say it's actually meaningful. Another big complaint has been about the voice lines that are missing this episode as well. I think it's a huge shame that Bungie couldn't round those out due to the strikes. And it's a weird sort of unfinished component of Heresy in a lot of ways. But otherwise for the episode, if you throw into the mix the update for Trials of Osiris, the extra events come in like Ride of the Nine. While some of it is janky, and the game is certainly suffering from serious testing issues and bugs, from a content perspective, Bungie have done many things very well this episode. So taking us to where we are now, as some folks have said recently, it's kind of a weird position for Bungie to be cooking with regards to the new content, and equally to be struggling so much in terms of player numbers and sentiment. Without a doubt, I wish that the other episodes this year could have been closer to the level that Heresy's at. And I think Bungie would have genuinely held on to many more players if they'd been able to do that. Equally, I think a big part of Bungie's overall problem is that this game and franchise is quite old now. So players get tired much faster than they once did. And if you couple that with the fact that less devs are working on the game, and Bungie are clearly under a lot of pressure between their structural changes as a studio, a move to a new format with Destiny, and Marathon in tow as well, it's a really weird mix of some of what they're putting out being on par with their best work ever, and perhaps even better than that in some instances. But it's all coming in combination with far less patience from their core audience. And I think that leads us to what happens next. The silence around Frontiers, in my opinion, is now absolutely hurting Bungie and this franchise. I don't know the exact reasons for it, and I think we've probably touched on some of them in this video, but players are aware of the structural changes and struggles at Bungie, and with Destiny being an investment game, and there being no conversation around the 2025 expansion for months now, it isn't giving players confidence about the future, and I think that does the community, the game, and Bungie no favours whatsoever. Having said that, I think it is about to change. Personally, I'm pretty confident that we're going to hear something about the next expansion within 1 month of now. It's the only thing that makes any sense. If somehow that doesn't happen, and we get to Ride of the Nine, for instance, in May, without Bungie contextualising that gap filler content, right, which is what it is, and a discussion around how that leads to a policy follow, things will frankly get worse. Like I've said, while there is a critical component to what I'm saying, Bungie have done a lot of things well this episode, and I just hope that they can grab that little bit of momentum soon and give players something positive to look forward to. If they don't manage to get this right, I believe it will further profoundly hurt this franchise overall, which is my main concern over the next few months. On top of that, Bungie have to now repeatedly knock it out of the park in the coming months. If they can't do that, or the perception is that they haven't done that, personally I don't believe that this next multi-year saga that they talk about will actually be remotely viable. I say this from a position of love for the game and not because I just want to complain. Those are just my feelings about it. Right, I'm going to stop ranting now. We've been all over the field on this one, the highs, lows, and the proof that ultimately Bungie are still capable of producing a very good Destiny game. It's unfortunately just clear at the same time that they're under a lot of pressure, and all I can really say to finish this video is that I wish Bungie the best of luck sticking the landing here, as obviously we're at a pretty critical stage. So those are my thoughts of where we're at, Heresy, the lead up to Frontiers, and the general vibes around the game. Of course, a lot of this is my opinion. Again, some of it is anecdotal based on what a lot of people in this community are saying, so you'll have to give me your thoughts down in the comment section. If you've enjoyed the conversation though, a rating below really does help us out, and 100% I will still be covering Destiny 2 as we head into the next expansion, assuming I can survive until then as well. So there we go guys, thank you for watching today, and whatever you get up to, I will catch you all very soon.